going on, everybody? Welcome to the Real Reviews podcast. Hope and pray you guys are doing well. We have a very psychological and interesting Japanese anime for you in this animated series of the Real Reviews podcast. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. We're trying to reach our first 1,000 subscribers. We're almost halfway there at 450 subscribers. So, yay. So, what's up to the one person in the chat, other than my friends who are joining me on the stream itself? Shout out to the Revelator. He says, "Good evening. I am here, but I will not be able to stay long. I need to be up at 3 a.m. my time." Okay, so make sure you share the link as much as possible, bro. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it. With that said, I am going to introduce my squad. What's going on? Nate 2, D2, we're going to start with our general thoughts of the film, get right into it, as I know there are a lot of things I want to talk about in the film, and I'm pretty sure they want to as well. So, Nate 2, D2, man, what are your general thoughts of the film, and what have you been up to, bro?
Hey, so haven't been up too much except watching this film. My general thoughts, after watching this, I just had to kind of sit there and process everything that I had just viewed. And I was, I'm kind of my I don't have a very good attention span sometimes. So a lot of times I'm pausing and going to the bathroom or checking my phone or something. I think I only paused like once because I was so engaged with the story and what was happening. And when I finished, I don't even know how to explain like the feeling that was kind of what was going through my head and my heart. And I sort of felt like, one, it's crazy that I hadn't heard of this until we put it to the list.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seemed to me almost like a story that. So I was thinking about how how in the history of humanity, there are works that kind of leave their indelible mark on the culture, and people just kind of know about it, and it has a sort of, it's just part of the fabric of created works. You think of Shakespeare or Van Gogh's paintings or poems, pieces of literature or whatever. And I was just like reflecting on this film after having seen it, and I was like, I felt like this needs to be something like that, something that leaves its mark, that has left its mark, that is part of the fabric of the discussion of created works. Just like, all the other things that everyone seems to know about, Sun Tzu's Art of War, things like that, and I hope, somehow I hope it does get more exposure, because I think people need to see this. It is, I think it is a good way to approach the subject of the bombing of Japan, because I feel like I've never seen it approached from the point of view of just regular citizens,
Mm-hmm.
or regular family, and it puts it into a kind of perspective, because that wasn't, it was, the focus wasn't the bomb. Obviously everyone knows that's coming, and so that kind of affects the way you watch the movie, but it's about the family, and it sort of humanizes the story. And so yeah, it's one I'm going to be thinking about for a while, but I'm looking forward to getting more into it as we go on.
Awesome. Yeah, it's okay. And of course, we have to thank our sis Michelle, because she's the one who recommended we do this film. I have never seen this film. It wasn't even on my radar, and I like to consider myself somebody who's pretty cool when it comes to knowing at least the popular things in anime. So Michelle, as the one who introduced this film to us, I'm interested in hearing your general thoughts about the film and maybe why you recommended it.
Yeah, so I watched it when it first came out, and I was like, this is so incredibly sad, but it's very poignant, and it shows, um because we live in a country where we don't necessarily see firsthand the effects of war, see firsthand the effects of bombings. We don't we don't see those things firsthand. So it's not in our purview as much as it may be in other countries.
Hmm.
So it gave me a new perspective of people dealing with trauma from being in war torn countries, or trauma of being involved with war, or trauma of losing people that you love because of war. Outside of, like, we can understand that at a level, like, oh, our soldiers aren't coming back home, but to see them um in that way, like, it's not the same. And so it deals with a lot of things. I like to read a lot, and one of the books that I've read that I really like to read, I think a lot of people find very popular, is Misreading the Scripture with Western Eyes. And even though he doesn't touch on war, I
Hmm.
think it's good that we look at the world not just from a standpoint of where we live, but like I said, in this corner of the world, like, we focus on our corner of the world, which looks vastly different from so many other corners of the world, that sometimes we negate other people and their experience with dealing with stuff like war, dealing with stuff like genocide, are dealing with that pain, and just they're living this every day, so they have become accustomed to it. And sometimes it's hard for people to go back to normal life when you accustom that. Again, we even see our soldiers when they come home, they have PTSD, they suffer from a lot of different things. So I think it kind of helped to see why some of our soldiers and our veterans suffer the way they do emotionally and mentally,
Hmm.
but to also see the importance of um, why refugees exist in our own country, because these are things that they're going through that they don't have any control over.
You know, you mentioned quite a few things that are going to transition exactly into what I want to talk about as far as when the film became interesting to me. You mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned the PTSD that the individuals are dealing with. But before I get into that, when you talked about how I liked how you tied, what's the name of the book you mentioned, Through Western Eyes?
Misreading scripture through Western eyes.
So, misreading scripture through Western eyes, I think that was a beautiful, real review, epic way to tie it into in this corner of the world. Because watching this film, let's just say from a Western perspective, you don't get to hear the storylines of the individuals who were there when the bomb happened, or the trauma or the war. Right? It's always we hear what happened in America, or why, and it can become very polarizing, I think. So I love the way you tied that in. But I'm gonna tell you when this film became interesting to me. I'm gonna be honest. When I first started watching the film, and it was jumping a lot, between her daydreaming and her like real life, I was like, I don't know, it feels kind of disjointed. I'm not sure if I almost thought, I don't know if everybody, I didn't know what you guys were going to think about the film. I know since you suggested it, Michelle, I knew you would like it because you suggested the film. But sometimes when we suggest something that we like, it's not, that doesn't, automatically turn into everybody's going to like it, right? So I started watching the film, and I want to share something with the audience. When it became real is when I started looking at it this way. I was like, why are they focusing on daydreaming? Because, the song at the beginning of the film talks about daydreaming. She talks about daydreaming. It opens up with this wild character carrying her in a basket. And I'm like, what's going on? But then I started thinking, I said, well, they are living in a war torn, at least in a war torn time in their country. And I said, what, maybe there's a mental health aspect to this somehow in this film. And so I started going back in my occupational therapy brain, and I said, let me go and look up online something about this, about daydreaming. Is there a mental health tie-in to daydreaming that this film might be touching on that maybe a lot of people might miss? So really quickly, I want to share with you guys what I found online. And I'm going to read it for the audience. There's a little bit of reading involved. Just be a little bit patient, and you're going to see why I'm tying all of this together. So I went online and I found something called maladaptive daydreaming. I thought it was interesting. So I'm going to read some of these things for you. It says, sometimes known as daydreaming disorder, maladaptive daydreaming describes a condition where a person regularly experiences daydreams that are intense and highly distracting. So distracting, in fact, that the person may stop engaging with the task or people in front of them. These daydreams may be triggered by real life events or stimuli such as noise, smell, conversation topic, or movie. Maladaptive daydreamers may disassociate from reality to absorb themselves completely in their daydream and may unknowingly act out the behavior or speak the dialogue of characters in their daydream. The content of daydreams can be richly detailed and fantastical, while others feature an idealized version of the daydreamer. Maladaptive daydreaming may develop as a coping strategy in response to trauma, as the inner world may feel safer than the experience happening outside. For example, people found themselves maladaptive daydreaming more frequently during the COVID 19 lockdown when they felt a greater urge to daydream and the vividness of their daydreams intensified. I'm going to skip this part and I'm going to go, well, I might as well not. It's just a small paragraph. So, maladaptive daydreaming was first defined in 2002 and is not yet recognized in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. That's something we had to learn in occupational therapy, trying to figure out what's in that system. So that way, when we're talking about our clients or talking to our patients, we're referencing something that has been studied. So I find it interesting that it's not yet recognized. It says, but the condition appears to be more common among people with anxiety, depression, or obsessive compulsive disorder. Over half of maladaptive daydreamers have a mental health disorder. So check this out. A person can exhibit, and as Nate and Michelle, when you watch the film, tell me if this is something that was happening in the film. A person can exhibit one or more symptoms of maladaptive daydreaming, including intense, vivid daydreams that present as a story with characters, settings, and plot lines, daydreams that are triggered by real-world events or sensory stimuli, unconscious facial expressions, repetitive body movements, or talking or whispering that accompany daydreams, daydreams that last for several minutes to hours, a strong or addictive desire to keep daydreaming, trouble focusing and completing daily tasks due to daydreams, trouble sleeping. And then let me read this last piece, and I promise I'm going to let you guys jump in. Maladaptive daydreams can be so immersive and lengthy that the person disassociates from the world around them, negatively impacting their relationships, work or school performance, sleep, and daily life. Studies of medical students have found that those who engaged in maladaptive daydreaming reported a significant decline in their GPA. So there's a lot more information. You guys can look it up. I would actually suggest, because of course, you know, in Real Reviews, our goal is to educate you on things that are happening, and maybe how we can use a film like this to communicate the gospel or help other people. So with all that information stated, one of the things I definitely want to mention, because Nate, you mentioned it earlier. Let me make sure I get the little thing real quick. Let me find it. Okay. So you mentioned something at the end of the film where she said that she just wanted to stay in the daydream, right? But no, and one of the actual inclinations here was a strong or addictive desire to keep daydreaming, which I found interesting. So I'll start with you, Nate. After me reading all of that information, and maybe, you know, I mean, we talked a little bit about it prior to going on live. Are you looking at the film differently? Did anything from the definition and that I was reading stand out to you or kind of connect with you in any way to certain story plot lines?
I don't know. It's kind of sounding like me, to be honest, because I'm a daydreamer.
Wow.
But yeah, kind of. I mean, when we were, I sort of alluded to this before we went on, but you bringing this up sort of derailed my impression of this the film a little bit. But I can kind of see that the notion of maladaptive daydreaming in what's her name? Is it Souza? I think
Suzu.
Suzu, yeah. Suzu's life, kind of. I didn't necessarily see it in a way of it negatively impacting other people, and I didn't at the time. I didn't feel like it was a way to escape anything either. You know,
Okay.
It wasn't. My impression wasn't necessarily that she was trying to trying to deal with drama. I think at the end, it sort of seemed like that when she was crying and breaking down. When she was in the English dub, she was saying that, and this was after she had just found out that Japan had surrendered, and she was crying and breaking down, kind of dealing with the fact that, what was all this for, losing her arm, losing her niece, or losing her hand, losing her niece. And the English version said, "Well, why can't I just die a daydreamer?" The Japanese translation, the subtitles, it says, "If only I could stay distracted and oblivious until I die." So, I mean, I think at that point, I sort of, I did kind of see a desire to escape the reality of the world. And I thinking about it, it does sort of make sense when they're dealing with everything with the war, with the air raid sirens and having a bomb shelter. It does sort of make sense, I guess, that she's using daydreaming to escape. And I think that's something that a lot of us do with just different things, different vices or whatever, entertainment or food or whatever. We use that to escape. I think those are kind of forms of or different ways of escaping that's similar to daydreaming. Kind of a daydream, and they're sort of daydreams in themselves, I think, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I'm still gonna have to kind of marinate on that, on the idea of maladaptive daydreaming and how that fits into this film, because that is an interesting way to look at it. I might need to rewatch it and see it from that perspective. But it's not. I don't think I quite saw it that way when I was initially watching it.
No, and the thing is, I don't know if I just got lucky that I was thinking along those lines. At least my brain worked that way. But after kind of thinking, I caught it pretty, I would say, like I was a quarter way into the movie, because this movie was actually pretty long. So I was like, I was a quarter way in, and I paused the movie. And because at first I was, like I said earlier, I was like, I don't know, hopefully they like it. I don't hear it sucked. Why we watch this? I was just thinking along those lines. Like when we watched Spirited Away, I actually enjoyed the film. But when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, let me go back. And so I got lucky that I caught it maybe a quarter into the movie, because then it made the entire movie that much more vivid for me. But before we go on, Michelle, I definitely want to hear your thoughts after me talking about maladaptive daydreaming. Maybe it's something you caught as well, because I know we talk about things like this pretty consistently when it comes to mental health therapy and things like that. Is there anything about the definitions that I read that maybe sparked an idea? Maybe you caught this early. Maybe you knew about this. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, I didn't really have a name for it, but she was very distracted. Like even at the very beginning of the movie, like when they're supposed to be doing work, she would be distracted. When it first came on, she would be going to market. She was drawing her in this whimsical, being carried around. Her friend that she had a crush on, she was drawing, and he snuck up on her, and he didn't realize it. So she was very like into her daydreams, and I think. So like even when they were sitting at the table eating, and they were talking about being her and her sister and her grandma was talking about being married, and he was like, I just he even says it like, I'm kind of like, he don't really say daydream, but that's basically what he said. Like I daydream a lot, and that's not really my thing. And then when the guy she went to school with that she didn't even remember came to ask her for her hand in marriage, and then he took her back to his family, and she got really busy doing, like, he became very responsible for the house there, because his sister left and got married. And so he had took over his sister's duties because he was in the Navy. And so I think she had less time to daydream as much because she had a lot more responsibilities. And like we see in the movie, as the more responsible she gets, like the more responsibility she gets, the more that she has to do, the less time she has to daydream. Like when they're rationing, we see her like in the forefront, like even though we see her initially daydreaming, We
Mm-hmm.
see her in the forefront, like getting stuff, taking care of stuff, helping people, going around, in the neighborhood, making sure people had stuff, introducing herself to people. We see her becoming a little bit more social, and
Mm-hmm.
it takes away from that. And so I think even though she may have used it initially, because they were like, oh, her brother was mean and, he wasn't treated as kind as she probably would have liked to been. And I think she did use it at that point for that. But I think once she realized, like, I can't live in this world of daydreaming, I have to be serious about, life right now. It kind of took away from that. But I do think, like, at the end, I think if she could have kind of went back, because um when her husband comes and like jumps on her to kind of save her, and he's like, I'll come back to you, and she's kind of like ready to give up, because at this point, like, there's no daydream that can save you from the trauma and the pain and the torment that you're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it kind of changes and shifts, because this all the things that she's been through, it's like, I don't. And then, like, she felt so bad about her niece. Like, that would have been a perfect time for her to do it, but she was just so depressed and so, like, had so much anguish that she just couldn't even bring herself to it. So I think she was initially, but I think so much happened that it just took her away from that. And I think this is just me speculating. I think her trying to retreat within herself would have made her feel like she was being selfish to the people who was still dealing and reeling with the things that was going on around them.
Mm. You made some pretty good points, and I want to jump on the topic that you kind of brought up, and is this the idea of the marriage? And I want to kind of get your guys' thoughts on prearranged marriages. I guess the question is that I want to pose just in general before I get into some details about how it applied in the film is: are arranged marriages the best way to get married, or is how we do things today the best way? So that's going to be general. So just you can get your wheels turning a little bit on maybe your thoughts about it. But I thought something was interesting. I could be maybe reading too deeply into this. It's the conversation between the grandmother and the daughter and Suzu. She gives her this line that, basically the scenario that's going to play out for her during her time with her husband, her first time sleeping in the same room with her husband. And she says, basically, your husband's going to ask you, did you bring an umbrella? You are going to respond, yes, I brought a brand new one. And then he would say, can I open it? You must say yes. Then she says, I guess I'm becoming an adult. Now, this might be me reading way too far into it, but to me, it kind of felt like a parent preparing their daughter for their first intimate time with their husband. And that the umbrella scenario was not really an umbrella, but it was basically her opening herself up to her husband in the biblical sense. And I read that, and I could have been reading too deep into that, but the fact that she says, I think I'm becoming an adult, to me kind of signifies her becoming a woman finally coming together with her husband. But then what's interesting is that the film doesn't show anything like that. It shows him can I get your umbrella? And then he takes and he pulls the fruit. He doesn't ask, can I open it? So to me, it's like there's this suggestion, but maybe it's not. And is this just a daydream? Is she daydreaming about him saying, can I open it, in order to deal with the shocking fact that it's actually about an intimate relationship? And she imagined him going and grabbing the fruit off of the tree. Or was the fruit off of the tree, something else that may insinuate something else? So I may be thinking too deeply, but I don't think I am. I think the movie kind of opens that possibility up. So, Nate, as far as that scene, did you think about that at all? I don't know if that even entered your mind, at least when she's having the conversation with Suzu about the umbrella. What were your thoughts during that scene?
Well, you're the only one who's
No,
married, so I didn't think nothing about it. I mean, I hope me and Nate are single.
The
We
old
wasn't like, oh
SOC
my
is the
God.
only married one, so he can only.
Yeah, if Alfredo's here, he could help you, but yeah. He's not. So all I'm saying is I didn't. I was. I mean, yeah, it was kind of the talk without actually going into details, but
Hmm.
I wasn't. That's not something I cared about because I
Okay,
I'm good.
sis, you don't have to talk about it. It's okay.
I mean, I'm saying. I mean, it was, but I was like, you're like, so do you think a biblical sense? Like, what is
No,
going on here?
basically, what I'm asking is, did you just think about that as some kind of random conversation about an umbrella, or did you just think it was
No,
something more?
no, I caught it, but it just I didn't care enough about it because that's not my ministry. I know Nate might have got more details for you. I got nothing.
Okay, okay, no worries, sis. I ain't gonna force a conversation with you. Nate, did you think that in any way when it came to that scene?
Yeah, well, when she's speaking with the grandmother, I thought, oh, is this sometimes somehow symbolic uh to 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 their wedding night. So I did think that she was getting to that somehow, but I wasn't quite sure. I think I was trying to figure out the symbolism of the umbrella. I don't think I quite got it, like the
Mm,
whole can I open it or things like that. Like I don't think that didn't quite click to me, but I did sort of assume because they were talking about a suitor and okay, you have to say this, and I was like, okay, maybe this is some kind of ritualistic way of dealing with the couple being intimate for the first time.
hmm.
Um, and then when he grabbed the fruit, and that's interesting that could be a daydream. I didn't even think of that, but when he grabbed the fruit, yeah, I was just like, oh, okay, maybe is that part of the ritual? Maybe that's
Hmm.
what the husband's supposed to do. I sort of dismissed it, and but that I think that scene was interesting in that it's obviously what they're implying, but they do it in such a way where they kind of I think they make they portray, I think, that scenario as something that's beautiful, where it's
Hmm.
oftentimes it's not in film these days. So I did appreciate that aspect of it, and it's interesting because I mean I think when when she goes into the room, she actually I think she actually says, have we met before today?
Yeah.
So as far as she knows, he's a stranger. So that's kind of interesting that they're sharing they're about to share an intimate moment, um not having really known each other. um but yeah, no, I did think that somehow the grandmother was trying to prepare her. I thought it was interesting that she didn't that Suzu doesn't understand why she has to say all these things,
Hmm.
but somehow the grandmother is still telling her she has to. And I'm kind of curious if her husband was he given a similar talk, but he had more information about what he was supposed to do. So
Probably.
that's kind of interesting how if he understands the ritual and the code, but he understands where it leads, but Suzu's not supposed to. Um, uh, I don't know what that signifies either, but that's kind of an interesting aspect of it as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it was in fact the talk and that scene because it was a anime and little kids are going to watch it. I think the only individuals who were supposed to pick up on it was the adults because we have a little more of a matured mind, whereas the kids are like, "Oh, okay, yeah, umbrella." Because she says when he asks, "Can I open it?" you must say yes. It's again preparing her. You can't deny your husband this thing in a way. You know what I mean? It looks like Roxby kind of thought along those same lines. She says, "That's how I understood that scene." Then she goes, "Did she, or maybe you meant to say she did, seem surprised later on when she kissed her husband and liked it? I can't believe I'm here doing this with him." So that's a very insightful piece of dialogue. I can't believe I'm doing this here with him could imply that in her mind and in her body, she was experiencing the intimate moment, whereas she was only able to kind of communicate that through her daydream as, "I can't believe I'm doing this here with him." So it could go in so many different directions. That's why, to me, this film became absolutely epic the moment I looked at it through the lens of maladaptive daydreaming. Because even though it's a beautiful moment between a husband and wife when they first are intimate, it can be shocking as well to a young lady and even to a young man, because this is the first time, or should be the first time, they're doing this. So it's not like how our culture is over sexualized. If you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's never seen or had, intimate dealings before, this is a shock to the system, a shock to the psychology, a shock to the mind. Which is why, of course, when you do this, you should be married to that person and not give that gift to someone else. But yeah, that's one of the scenes that popped out to me as far as that goes. Before I kind of just keep rambling
Before
on
you
it.
move on,
Yeah, go
SOC,
for it.
I just want the audience to know SOC said don't have the sex until you married.
There you go. That's right. That's what Jesus said. uh, but yeah, keep yourselves reserved for that person that you marry. I mean, just hands down. Of course, this is a Christian channel, so I have to say it. The best experience is when you are married to your husband and wife. Don't just give that gift away to anybody else who hasn't dedicated themselves and committed themselves to you for life. Because a lot of broken hearts happen. A lot of trauma happens when somebody is taken advantage of and then not loved anymore. So that's why you should reserve yourselves for that time. And this film, I really enjoyed the art in which it did that, and that it communicated it to the adults without being overtly sexualized. But it also, a kid could watch this movie and not even catch on to that until much later. In other words, it won't offend a child's mind the way they described it. So I thought it was actually a sign of pure genius. I'm one of those individuals that say you don't have to put that in a movie to convey emotion, love, and marriage. It takes a lot more creativity, a lot more, I think, guts to try to portray something that's emotional and loving and caring and unifying without having to go there and show it on the screen. One of the films that I think did a great job at that, and is a movie that we reviewed, Ip Man. Ip Man did not show any intimacy between him and his wife, but you knew how close they were. They were actually portrayed through the struggles they had. If you continue to watch the Ip Man series, you discover that his wife dies from, I believe it was cancer. I'm not 100% sure. I know she was ill. My thoughts is that it was cancer, but they built their relationship up so much that you got the love, you got the intimacy without having to see that overtly sexualized thing that we see in our society today, where it seems like they just throw it in every film or every show, and it doesn't need to be there. If you took it out, the movie wouldn't change, which shows me that it doesn't need to be there. But Nate, or let's go with Michelle. Michelle, is there something in the film that there was something like you definitely wanted to talk about, another scene in the film or something that stood out to you?
Actually it is. So at the very end, we see, and I thought it was actually her niece for a second.
Mm-hmm.
We see a little girl sitting on a rock with a woman who has like shards on her side, and she's dying. And we see she's missing an arm. So this is why I thought she was daydreaming. So it does kind of go with the aspect of daydreaming. So I thought she was actually daydreaming about how she wished it was her, because she said that a couple times, and not her niece, and the little girl kind of looked like her niece. But then we see the little girl like walking through the city, and like she's by herself. And that's another aspect of the movie too. Like we see children who don't have parents anymore just walking around. And so the little girl walks in, like some of the food fall. Her and her husband's talking about him working in Hiroshima at the time. And the little girl like picks it up. And even though like she's hungry, and this is when I realized the little girl was real. Like the first time I seen it, like I thought it was that, but like when I rewatched it, because I already knew she was real. And so like this little girl who hasn't eaten anything, she's by herself, she's dirty. Like she looks up to them, and she offers the food back that fell, and they're like, "Oh, you can have it." And then she comes up to her and she holds on to her as if like, you're probably the nicest person that they haven't come across since my mom has died, and like I carried my mom because like she was dragging her mom was dying and she was falling down,
Hmm.
and she like and I'm thinking like this baby so young have witnessed so much, and all she wanted was like somebody to just love her and
Hmm.
be there for her. And her husband, Susan, and her husband didn't have any kids, and he's already feeling bad about her niece, so she takes the little girl um back home with them to like adopt the little girl when she could have just like left her. And I think as Christians, sometimes we fail to do justice when it comes to kids in foster care, kids in um like kids who need to be adopted. Like we don't do well in that aspect of it when God told us to take care of the widows and the orphans. And we see like the sister's husband died. And I'll get more into that when we talk about arranged marriages. The sister's husband dies and the sister comes back home. So we see a widow, and then we see an orphan, like in this movie, and they are taken care of, um, and they are loved and they are protected, which is how it's supposed to be. And I think a lot of times we fail to do justice in that aspect because it shouldn't be so shocking that people are raising other people's children when those children don't have parents or they have parents who aren't able to take care of them. We don't step in to help. And I'm very pro-life, but if if we're going to be pro-life, we need to make sure that once these children are here, that we are set up to help in some kind of way. Like even if that's you taking the kid out, once a month, like it doesn't even have to be a bunch of kids, just one kid. Maybe you take the kid out once a month and you show them a nice time so they can see that there are people who care about them and they have a village to help and protect them, and they feel safe. And we kind of neglect that aspect of it. Um, and so I feel that part was really touching to me
Hmm.
because she just took this random baby like out the street just because she held onto her arm, and it was her arm where her hand was missing. Little girl didn't care. None of that mattered to her. At that moment, that little girl just needed to feel safe, and she made that baby feel safe, and she took care of that baby. And the baby bought lights in their house too. Gonna call
Yeah, I
that out.
remember
And,
that.
and and they didn't put her out. And like even though her sister had lost um her daughter, she goes and says, well, she could fit her clothes. So like we're even seeing her open up in sharing something like that is still traumatic for her because she lost her daughter. I mean, that's that she kind of lost both her kids, but the one that she really had with her, she lost her daughter. And so she's now sharing that part of her life with this little girl who has nobody. And so that is probably one of like the most touching parts um of the movie for me.
I want to talk a little bit about that scene because artistically, it was probably one of the most gripping horror scenes. I think they did a great job conveying death in the late and when she was holding her mother's hand with the shards of glass in her body. The part that got me is when her body plopped down, the flies came and started. I was like, whoa, what an image to show an audience of a rotting body, a dying corpse, just to kind of push that image home. And I thought it was such a well done scene. And then to see the little girl kind of abandoned, not, of course, the mother didn't abandon her like she just didn't want to be with her daughter, but when that mother died, it was a complete, she was totally on her own. She was eating the garbage. And the fact that she came over and she just held, was it Suzu's hand?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. I was
Mhm.
just making sure because sometimes, like you said, at first I thought that was a flip on Suzu and the little one, and I was like, are they showing an alternate reality of what would have happened if she got blown up instead of her and she got the brunt of it? Just I thought it was interesting, but yeah, it was definitely a very impactful scene, definitely. And I love the way it conveyed that through art, the way they did that. And again, to me, this is proof positive that you don't have to have like the highest end CGI to convey a very deep, a very well told story because the art wasn't distracting at all. Yes, you can tell it's an older anime film, but that did not take away from the movie at all. It's not like I was like, oh my goodness, look at these graphics. They're horrible. You know what I mean? It was nothing like that. And I'm a person who pays attention to CGI and digital graphics and stuff like that. So the fact that it didn't pull me out was very, very amusing and very, very well done, in my opinion. So Nate, before we get into the arranged marriage thing, because then I'm gonna flip right back to Michelle. Is there another scene in the film that kind of stood out to you while you were watching it?
Well, maybe kind of jumping off of what Michelle was talking about, and kind of what we were talking about earlier about when Zuzu was breaking down after hearing on the radio that they were surrendering, and she was dealing with the reality of that, at least in her mind. I think that everything that she had been holding on to, the hope of getting through this and having some sense of victory, all of that had come crashing down. And I think she had been holding on to some kind of false reality or hope. I mean, we were talking about that with the daydreaming earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly it's like she couldn't hold on to that anymore. Like everything was too real. Everything, there was no piece of illusion that she could convince herself was real. And again, the quote from the original Japanese, or at least the translation, I don't want to assume that the translation is good, but if only I could stay distracted and oblivious until I die. And I think a lot of us go through life hoping that we can do that. We get through the day doing everything we need to do, going to school, going to work, or whatever, and hoping that we can just come home and have a beer, watch some TV, and just check out and not have to think about responsibilities. And I think in a way that's kind of what I think Suzu was doing throughout the film, which makes sense because she's growing up in this the World War II era with all the air sirens and the threat of dying, and then all of that comes crashing down. And so, but at the end, what you see after she deals with that, after her husband comes home, he's made it through, and they're trying to get on with their life, and they adopt this child who's gone through their own trauma, and you see kind of the bird's eye view. They're in their home. You can kind of see that they're sort of patched up the house that had been obviously affected by the attacks, but you can tell that there's hope, that they are moving forward, and that there is, I would argue, joy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think Suzu the whole time was just trying to use her daydreams to be happy, have a kind of circumstantial way of coping with the reality. And it sort of made me, I looked at that. I was looking at Suzu's reaction after the surrender versus where they end up and where they are together with the girl. I assume it's a girl, the orphan child, and her husband trying to build this family, trying to get their life back together. And I thought, it seemed to me that this in many ways is a picture of what the gospel is, what the good news is for us, at least on this side of heaven. Because I think, at least within the film, they're holding on to something that's real, something that maybe isn't necessarily always going to be happy or easy, but it's something that's, I think, to them good. And it's, even despite what they've been through, because that's the reality, is that we are going to have to deal with troubles on this earth. And so instead of ignoring that, I think there's a sort of acceptance of that. At least that's my interpretation. but they're going to care for one another. They're going to care for this child. They're going to care for each other. The Suzu and her husband are going to care for each other as husband and wife, and they're going to go forward in the hope, a real hope, in sort of redeeming the situation instead of letting it conquer them. And I thought, okay, this is sort of, I think, what the gospel is supposed to be to a lot of people, is where you become sober to what reality is. You don't rely on earthly things to make you feel happy, and you go forward with anchoring your joy in something that's real. Now, within the realm of the film, obviously, it's not they're not anchoring their joy and their hope in Christ, but I think there's still a kind of reality that they've come to accept, and I think it's still a good analogy for, I think, what it means to find Christ. There's a reality to that, a joy to that, that's real and enduring, and we don't have to check out. We don't have to create fantasies in order to face reality, because it's, well, I forget the verse, but it's, Jesus says, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, because I have overcome the world." Mm-hmm. And I think what you see at the end is them, that it's kind of like what you see with them moving forward, I think, is what somebody coming to Christ should look like, understanding that there is still going to be trouble, but you've overcome, and you can rest in that. And I thought that was a good image of what the gospel is supposed to look like.
I think you're absolutely right. And the fact that, I think anybody who watches this film who is a Christian, is going to see a lot of parallels. One of the things Michelle mentioned in a joking manner, but also seriously to some degree, is when the little girl came in the house and she had lice. And, they didn't just toss her out. They cleaned her. They were the hands and feet, in a sense, of Jesus, right? So, as Christians, you're going to get individuals who are coming from all sorts of different backgrounds, different walks of life. And if we look at them and they come in and they don't, quote unquote, look the part of a Christian that some people think along the lines of, we can actually be responsible for pushing them away from Jesus versus helping to clean them. Now, of course, ultimately that cleansing is only going to happen by the Lord's hand, but the Lord uses us. We are the hands and feet of Christ in helping to kind of help clean them, help shape them, and mold them into the image of God, right? And the fact that God uses us, God used that family. They used the ones that were hurt. They understood pain. I tend to find that individuals who are associated with pain, who have experienced trauma, can sometimes be more loving than individuals who haven't. That's not always the case. I'm not saying that that's always how it is. But individuals who usually go through a difficult time in life tend to be very merciful and understanding because they know how it feels. And I think Suzu experiencing that, she automatically maybe viewed her as the little girl that perished in the film, but also as a new way to start, like Nate was talking about. It was like a fresh way to like begin anew. And so we're gonna move into the arranged marriage portion, whether it is the best way or not the best way. And I want Michelle to be the first one to speak on that, but I don't want to ignore our listeners. I want to take the time to say what's up to some people. Mr. Green, hey, what's up, Mr. Green? Thanks for always being here, bro. He says, if you get a chance to read John Hersey's Hiroshima, I highly recommend reading. Lots of scenes similar in Hershey's work. Terrible tragedies played out over and over. Do me a favor, Mr. Green, if you are able to, can you find an Amazon link to that book and drop it in the live chat, just so that way people can go ahead and do that. Or if I have an opportunity, I will, while Michelle and everybody are talking about this portion. What's up, Rachel? She goes, I am so sensitive of a human. I'm getting emotional just hearing you guys speak of what happened in this so far. You know what? It was one of those films that were definitely shockingly, surprisingly emotional. I did not expect it from this film. I expected some degree of tragedy because I read the synopsis of the film before I watched it, but I was not prepared. I didn't believe it or not, and I tend to tear up at movies like this. I didn't tear up, but I was very enthralled psychologically. Like I was in deep thought watching this whole film. She says, I have goosebumps. You should. You should have goosebumps. And I think if you haven't watched the movie already, which I don't think you have, I think it's something that you should definitely take a look at. If I don't know if you're into Japanese anime or not, but if you're not, I think this is a good introduction to give somebody into the world of anime and how deep a story can get and how tragic it can be. She says also holding on to fragments of joy in their tribulations. I think that was a response to what you were saying, Nate, and that she was finding these pockets of joy in the tribulation, which is also the date. And I think you also spoke on this earlier where you talked about how we all have these coping mechanisms when it comes to dealing with the difficulties of life. Hers was daydreaming. I think you mentioned earlier, just getting home, drinking a beer, watching, and just kind of disconnecting from the responsibilities of life. I know me and my wife, when I get home from work, we usually have dinner, maybe watch a show that we've been following for quite some time. And that's our way of kind of decompressing from the day. And so I definitely agree with you, Nate, on that. Okay, so with that said, let's talk about, maybe have a little fun on whether or not arranged marriages are the ideal or how we do things in society today. Is that the ideal or is it a mix of both? Michelle, I want to let you go first. Arranged marriages, what do you have to say, sis?
So in the movie, we see both. Suzu's marriage is arranged.
Mm-hmm.
But he says his sister actually picked her husband. He went to the watch shop one day and she was like, well, there, big fella, how you doing? And he was like, well, how you doing? And then they got married. And then he passed away. So she actually got to pick her husband and she loved her husband, and Suzu learned to love her husband. Like she grew to love him because what is his name? I can't remember his name. Her friend who she actually wanted to marry in the beginning. When he came,
was he real?
yeah, he was real. So remember he talked about because her husband would like let him stay there, and he was like, it's inappropriate for you to stay in his house with my wife and my sister. You have to go stay in the shed. So she goes out in the shed, starts talking to him. Now the scene of him and the end when she was like, I finally get to see the boats like that, he wasn't real then.
Mm-hmm.
But like he tries to like have an inappropriate relationship with her. And she was like, I actually do love my husband and I don't think that'd be right. And he was like, okay.
He was really cool about it, huh?
Yes, he was. He was like, all right, well, that's how you feel about it. And so she does grow to love her husband. I call those two scenes out to say I actually have a couple friends who have arranged marriages. So one of my old coworkers, she's from India, and her marriage was arranged. And at the point when I finally met her and her husband had been together for 30 years. They had 2 kids. They was putting their kids through college. And I asked her, I said, did you meet your husband prior? She said, well, we had a 3-month time where we could get together, ask questions, and get to know each other before we got married. And I asked her, did she love him? She said, no. She said the same thing Suzu said, like, I love my husband now. She's like, no, but because our parents thought that we would be a good fit, I went along with what my parents wanted, and we learned to love each other. And she's like, I don't think he loved me, and I didn't love him, but we learned to love each other. And I would ask her, I'm like, because I'm interested, like, because that's not what we do here. So I'm asking all these questions, and she was like, even though her children have the choice to meet their own people, she said she feels it's better for arranged marriages because it takes away a lot of the stress and the pressure that is involved in our normal Western dating rituals. And I was like, I never actually thought of it that way. I mean, granted, I want to choose. Don't arrange me with nobody. I'm good, fam. But I do want to actually arrange ZJ's marriage. I have really given that a lot of thought.
Mm.
I have tried to arrange Ivory's marriage. I think I have somebody already. So I do want to arrange both of their marriages. I think it'll kind of cut out some of the stuff. And she was like, and because they knew that their marriages were going to be arranged, so they wouldn't cause harm to their family. A lot of the people in their culture don't do a lot of frivolous stuff that we engage in here in the Western countries
Mm-hmm.
because they know that if something come up on either side before the marriage is consummated, it can it can cause a lot of problems on both ends. So she was like, we don't. That's why I want my kids to, have an arranged marriage. She was like, but me and their father decided that if they want one, we will arrange one. If not, we'll let them choose. But I think it's very interesting with that. I think I think when she brought up the point that it cut it cut off a lot of the stuff that you get when you are like courting somebody, like you're with this person, you are trying to decide like what kind of relationship you're gonna have. It takes away all of the I wonder if they like me. It don't matter if y'all like each other. Y'all gonna get married and y'all gonna get yourselves together. And arranged marriages actually have higher success rates than non-arranged marriages. After she said that, I looked it up, and I was very curious to see like do these because I'm thinking like these marriages don't last. They actually have they have the lowest divorce rates among other kind of marriages. So I'm all for arranged marriage to the right family.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still looking for ZJ, so he's 11. I think I have somebody for him too. But if these falls through, ZJ's 11. He has another 10 years because I think he needs to wait till he's 21. He told me he's going to have a wife and some children, and so that's his goal. So in 10 years, I just need somebody from a good family, not just anybody, because I just can't have anybody's family with mine. I don't want to sound mean. But if you are a good family and you have you want to arrange a marriage and the kid is between the ages of 10 and 11, we can arrange this marriage, get some play dates going or something. Ivory is 7. She about to be 8. She can't get married for another 13 years. So, I need them at least to get out of college first and have some kind of world experience. But they know how to quote scriptures. They do science. We do science projects together. We have movie nights. They're really good kids. They have good diction. They come from a good family. If you know somebody, y'all family can pass the test, we definitely are looking to arrange some marriages. Just throwing that out there.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. You know what? It's interesting. You know what? I'll let you talk first, and then I'll give my thoughts. But just to the audience, Mr. Green did post the link to the book that he's recommending. So make sure if you guys are into reading, and if we maybe sparked a little interest in your mind by talking about this film, make sure you go ahead and click on that link. Thank you so much, Mr. Green, for taking the time to post it. I appreciate it. So Nate, when it comes to arranged marriages versus how it's usually done here in the West, do you go for both? Do you think one is better than the other? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, disclaimer, I don't think I really have, I don't know that I have that much wisdom on this topic, but just sort of spitballing and thinking expressing the thoughts that are in my head. I think it's interesting to consider if the marriage is arranged, there's still somebody that needs to be doing the deciding. Whereas if it's not arranged, you're dating within the Christian paradigm. You're courting.
Right.
You should be anyway. Then it's the man and the woman that are deciding.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody's deciding. And with humans, you have people that can have, you have people that are imperfect, making decisions from an imperfect mind, heart, because we're fallen. So either way, I think there can be pitfalls. So it sort of depends, I think, on who's deciding. I mean, if you have parents that are making a decision based on bad ideas, then that arranged marriage is not going to be good. Maybe they're thinking more of the wealth that they'll have or something. I don't know what goes into necessarily arranged marriages. Whereas if you're making the decision yourself, it's funny. There's been a meme that's been going around, and I've seen it through like stand-up clips or just like Instagram memes or whatever. But it's the same thing. Where people are saying, marriage is kind of weird. Basically, you're saying, hey, I kind of like you. You want to hang out until we die? And that's the way they kind of boil it down. And it's kind of funny. In a way, that's what it seems like. And I guess in some ways, that is kind of what it's like. But in a way, if we dig deeper, I think maybe it shouldn't be. And for a lot of people that are choosing their own spouse, that's what it is. It's like, oh, I'm lonely. I don't want to be lonely. I don't want to. I want to be with somebody. I want to have a companionship. I like hanging out with this person. Yeah, I mean that's what people do. They get married. Why not this one? Some people they know they don't want to be alone, so they end up settling because they're getting older and they want to have kids, and they don't want to be the one in their whatever age range without kids or without a spouse or going to their high school reunion. And so there's a lot of different motivations for why you might choose your spouse a certain way, or your parents might choose your spouse a certain way. So I wouldn't necessarily think that one is going to be better than the other. I think both can be good. I think both, I can see their advantages. Like Michelle says, if your parents are choosing that for you and you're okay with that, if it's not a cultural thing where it's like you that's just your obligation. Someone's going to choose for you, whether or not you like it. And, okay, that's going to kind of suck unless you get matched with someone that's good. But I can kind of see how taking the pressure of having to pursue someone, I can see how that could be an advantage, and how that could be relieving. At the same time, I can see how that can be a burden. I kind of saw that. I recently watched Fiddler on the Roof. Hadn't seen that ever, and there was something like that where a girl was going to be matched with this, like I don't know how old he was, like 70 or something.
Wow.
He had a cool name. His name was Laser Wolf. That's kind of a funny name.
That's one of my favorite plays.
I've never even heard of it.
Yeah, no, but fortunately, I mean, she didn't. She had somebody else. She had her eyes on, and so she begged her dad not to renege on his agreement to get married to this much older guy. But you think of things like that, it's like, okay, yeah, that's where arranged marriage is kind of, a young 20-year-old with, I don't even know how old he was. He was pretty old though. He was a widower. So I think it depends on the wisdom of those who are making the decisions. And I think maybe what is a good mix is you make the decision. You're the one that's you're the one that's courting. You're the one that's choosing, or I want to pursue you, or or I want to go out with you. But you have people around you that are telling you whether or not there are any red flags that you're not seeing, because you're going to be clouded by your own emotions. And if I think especially, I think, for those of us who are abstaining from sex before marriage, which you should be if we are Christians. It's weird that there are Christians that don't have that ethic, but it's another discussion. I can see how some people are maybe focusing on, okay, we can finally do this thing that we all want, but we're not supposed to do it until we get married. And then once you do it, it sounds like a lot of people, then the sort of the veil is torn down. You kind of you realize that you can't build a foundation on just having emotion, because that goes away. I mean, you hear that from people that have been married for a while. It's like it can't just be about feelings. So And I think that's the kind of pitfall with those who make the choice themselves of who they're going to marry, because it's based on emotions. So you kind of have to have people in your life as well that are speaking truth in love to you. So I wouldn't, I can't imagine that there's necessarily one way of going about it that's better than the other. I think if who's ever making the decisions for the marriage has a foundation in a biblical idea of what marriage is, I think that's what's the most important.
Amen. So my thoughts on whether arranged marriages or the way we do things in the West, I agree with Nate. He actually said my answer, which was good, where I think it's a combination of both. I think having your parents look out for you because they're thinking, if now, of course, these are for individuals who have both their mother and father in their life, or at least one of your parents in your life. I think it's good to have seasoned individuals who have been married for a long time help you with the decision. In that, I believe them looking at, yeah, let's say I had a daughter and I'm trying to find a husband for my daughter. The first thing I would say is, number one, does he love the Lord? My daughter may not think that. She might be like, is he cute? That's her first thought, right? And so I'm thinking long term. Now, I think our responsibility, if we are parents or we ever become parents, is your job is to provide as much information as possible so that when they do finally make the decision, I think the final decision should be up to the person. And they showed that in the film, actually, when they said, yeah, we arranged as marriages, but you don't have to. I think that was the best expression of, I think the best way to be married is have your parents look out for you, or have your guardians, or at least somebody who can look at it from a more objective point of view. So that, like Nate said, there are going to be some things you're not going to see. You're going to be wrapped up in the emotion and the feelings, and those things are important. You definitely want to feel attracted to your partner. You definitely want to be in love. You want to have those emotions. Those are all great things. I was that way. When I met my wife, she was beautiful to me. I got excited. I got butterflies, but those feelings aren't going to be the only thing that sustains the marriage. It's part of it, absolutely. And just so you guys know, to my audience, we just hit our 19-year anniversary in October. So I've been married for 19 years. So I do have some experience in at least a long-term relationship. So I'm giving you my wisdom here in that me and Michelle, not this Michelle, my wife's name is Michelle as
Yeah,
well.
I'm his sister. It's
She,
definitely not this Michelle. I just want to make that very clear. He's talking
yeah.
about, yeah, I'm his sister, his real sister. Don't get it twisted. And people say, no, y'all not. And I said, we are. And that's what matters. And when he talks about Michelle, he get googly eyed.
All right,
You
here
see
we
the
go.
stars in his eye. He'd be like, when I think about her, alas, the moon has set upon her beauty. The sun has shone on her glorious face. Like he starts talking real Shakespearean when he talks about her.
Well, she is a huge part of my life, and if you guys are interested, you just look at my testimony, you see why. At least she plays a huge role in my life, that the Lord created her for me, I think, for that specific time. But anyway, before I get too googly eyed, like Michelle said, me and my wife are very attracted to one another physically. We get along, we joke around, all those good things. But I can tell you that the most important thing that has held us together through difficult moments is Christ. Christ has been the foundation of our relationship. And I remember one of the questions she asked me was, she said, well, what are you looking for in a woman? And I said, somebody who loves the Lord. And she said, come on now, I know you're looking for more than just somebody who loves the Lord. But that was my honest response, because I thought to myself, I said, if she loves God with all of her heart, soul, mind, and strength, then she'll know how to love me, even with my flaws, right? So that was my thinking pattern. And what's interesting is that it was her thinking pattern as well. She thought along the same lines, that she did want somebody who loved God. And because I'm telling you, with Jesus being the foundation, you're going to go through ups and downs. Me and my wife have argued. You know what I mean? We've said things that we've regretted. We went through ups, we went through downs. Although there weren't many, but I would say in the first month or so of our marriage, it was hard. You know, we were just getting to learn each other. I was going through a traumatic experience dealing with leaving a cult. She's having to work through some of her old beliefs that weren't quite accurate in scripture, and then we're coming together. So it was, in a sense, kind of these two brand new human beings coming together, and all the baggage that came with it. But I remember there was a certain moment that we sat down and we said, listen, we made a vow before God. We're not just going to give up. Although we were thinking about it. We were like, I don't know if this is going to work. You know, all this stuff I was going through and she was dealing with, we didn't know. But because we, I think, had that conversation, I would say from that moment on, everything has been smooth sailing. Not perfect. Of course, you know, we're two imperfect people. So there's always going to be an argument
No,
here, an
no, no, no,
argument
no, no.
there.
Let me correct you.
What?
You're imperfect.
Oh,
Michelle is perfect.
okay. I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll be the imperfect one. She's the perfect one. But she'll tell you in a heartbeat that she's imperfect, though. But I would say that if your foundation isn't in Christ, then the marriage will most likely fall apart. And we're not measuring a successful marriage by how long people stay together, because there are very toxic relationships of individuals staying together for a long time. And there are many factors. So length of time is not necessarily the only indicator. I would say it's one of the indicators, right, that you guys can at least tolerate each other. But I think one of the other things is the quality of the length of that time. And I think that's what makes it beautiful. But to connect it to the film, when it came to marriages, sometimes you can, like Nate said, get those parents that are only thinking along the lines of what kind of stock does this young man come from? Does he come from a wealthy family? And if that's the only thing you're looking for, you're not really thinking about love. You're not thinking about the foundation being Jesus. You're thinking about the world. And once the world kind of infiltrates your marriage and your thinking, it will pollute it. And the thing is, when you go through a tough time, if all you have to hold on to is the world, your marriage is going to crumble. If all you have to hold on to is, oh, he makes a big check, oh, she looks this way, because all of that changes, my friends. You don't look young forever. The body's not tight forever. You know what I mean? And if you are just infatuated with how a person looks, it's going to change. Will you still love them after that? And that's where you have to dig a little deeper and get a good foothold in marriage. But okay, I had a bunch of other stuff, but this show is going kind of long. So here's what we're going to do. Maybe in the future, I'll make a separate video about my thoughts about it, maybe an addendum to different other aspects of the film. But I think we captured the film pretty good for you guys. And to those who haven't watched it, I hope we encouraged you to watch it. I hope our thoughts and our opinions about this film kind of motivate you to go watch it. So, Michelle, let's start with you. Final thoughts about the film and the final score out of 5 stars. What would you give it?
I really love it. So I took Japanese in high school, and I went to Japan in our senior year. So I will say Japan said we will get revenge because Tokyo is like 1,000 years ahead of anything that we've had here, and like it's even much more advanced since I've been there. And we and like it was ahead of us in 1999 where we're at now. So yeah, they said we will get revenge by just being light years ahead of you guys and everything else. So I did enjoy the movie. I watched it when it first came out, and I really like it. I forgot how sad it was. Like I remember like it was very heart-wrenching, but I forgot how sad that movie made me. And I just think with everything going on now, it helped me to gain a good perspective of a lot of the stuff that's actually going on in the world today, and how can we like walk alongside people who endure this, and how can we have a biblical response and have empathy as well. So for it just making me reflect upon what kind of person that I am to those who are suffering, I'll give it a 4 out of 5. And since Alfredo's not here to defend himself, he says a 5 out of 5. That may or may not be what he said, but he's not here to say nothing else. So guess what? He said 5 stars.
Awesome. Thank you, Sid. And just publicly, thank you for Michelle recommending this film, turning my attention to something I had never even was even on my radar. I definitely thank you for introducing me to this film. Truly enjoyed it. Thank you, sis. Nate 2D2, man, your final thoughts, final score rating. What would you give it, bro?
Yeah. So I think something that I forgot I wanted to talk about is how relevant this what they were depicting for just a normal Japanese citizen during World War II, how relevant it is to what's going on now in the Middle East. And there's a lot of people that are divided on what your position should be. But I think, and I'm not wise enough to say, oh, this is right, this side is right, whatever. But I think what we understand is that there are people, I think, suffering on both sides, and regardless of whose campaign you are, I guess, in support of, I think we need to remember that there are just normal, everyday family citizens that are suffering because of decisions that higher ups are making, and we need to be mindful of that aspect of it, because I think we can get really tribalistic on the positions that we take. And so even I think looking back on the bombing in Japan, I have no idea if it was right or wrong to make the decision to drop the bombs. I think I grew up kind of having that message being that, that was the right way to go, even despite it was a necessary evil. I think it seems like that's what the way they portrayed it when I was in school. But I think even if it was, watch this film and understand that there's an impact to these decisions that people are making. And we don't have necessarily a whole lot of control. We can vote, we can be activists, but ultimately other people are going to be making decisions. So we have to put our faith in Christ. And I think the best we can do is just bring these people the gospel. So we should be mindful of that, mindful of the people that are suffering. And let's not make an idol out of our political leanings, and realize that sometimes that we allow our tribalism to cloud our minds. So I think it would be really sobering right now for people to watch this film and see what's going on in the world. Obviously, not just the Middle East. There's a lot of conflict that we don't know about, that it just doesn't get a lot of coverage because it has no political implications to us. But there's still a lot of stuff that's going around. So just consider that, and consider those who are affected. Even if it's a righteous campaign, there are going to be people that are affected by that. So that's something I wanted to address. But as far as my rating, I feel like it should be. It feels like it should be a 5 out of 5, and I probably would have given it 5 out of 5. And if we were watched this in the first season, the way I kind of looked at things, but I probably like 4.75 out of 5, just based on, I think, as far as like technically and just the way it was written, drawn, and told and produced, it feels like it seems like it's a perfect film. But I know, as far as my feeling, I know, like, when I was watching Across the Spider-Verse, that's just like, for me, it's just like technically and just emotionally, that's just like 5 out of 5. Feels like a perfect film. Obviously, there's no such thing as a perfect film. It's a perfect film. I didn't necessarily feel that with this. I might in the future. If I feel bad giving it not 5 out of 5, but to be honest, I think probably 4.7 out of 5 is an honest rating from what I feel. Combining my head and my heart, 4.75 out of 5, or between 4.75 and 4.9. I don't know, something like that. But yeah, definitely you guys should watch this. It's on Peacock, it's on Treevee. I would say watch it on Peacock if you can, because Peacock puts their ads at the beginning, and then you can watch the whole thing uninterrupted. Though it's only in English, I would watch it in Japanese. And lastly, I didn't get to feature this, but I am wearing Samurai
All
Christ shirt. I don't know
right.
if this is available or not. I think this might be one of those that are no longer
I
available.
think that that's the retired version, but there is a updated version of the Samurai of Christ design, which I think came out better, but that one is good too. So if you guys want to support the channel, the link is in the description. Although I do think I have the link to the SOC store and not the Real Review store. I'm gonna have to change that in the description box. But thanks for showing it off, man. But that hat he's rocking is available, so make sure you guys go and grab it, and the mugs. Okay.
And real quick, when we hit 500 subscribers, someone will be entered to win a Real Review shirt.
Whoa. So that's motivation. Thank you, sis, for sponsoring that. That's nice. So when we hit 500 subscribers, getting the halfway mark, so it's 50 more people. So if you guys want to see more conversations like this, reach more people, which I think could be very effective in helping people look at film a little bit differently, and God willing, bring them to Christ, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit like. That's the only way to get these videos out to more people. And watch the hold on. There we go. Can you guys hear me now? I think my audio went out for a second.
Yeah, I was like, did my stuff go out?
My bad. I think I hit the wire on my mic. But anyway, okay, so for my rating, it might be a shock. I gave it 5 stars. And here's why I gave it 5 stars. First and foremost, it was one of those films that made me think after the movie was done. Not only that, it surprised me with its approach to maladaptive daydreaming. I did not expect it. And that transformed how I watched the entire movie. I did not think I was going to be taken by surprise when it came to that aspect. And because it dealt with maladaptive daydreaming, it changed every scene in the movie for me. I'm so glad that I got to see that I thought about it a quarter way in versus at the end. I think if I didn't realize the maladaptive daydreaming aspect, I probably would have gave it like a 4.5. But that half point popped up because of that aspect. So I enjoyed the film. I think it fostered very good conversation. I think this is one of the most deep conversations I think we've had in a minute. Although we tend to have pretty deep conversations when it comes to different films, but I think it's just one of those that it could have kept on going. Let me just show you guys. If you look at my notebook, 2 pages of just notes, and I think I mentioned 1 point out of those 2 pages, or maybe 2. So I had so much information I wanted to talk about. So like I said, maybe in the future, I'll give you maybe an addendum, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. If this video gets I'll put it this way. Let's make a goal. If this video gets 1,000 views, I'll make an addendum, and you'll get to see the rest of my notes and what I wanted to talk about in the film. We'll go there. So let's get this video here to 1,000 views. Even if you guys watch it each 250 times, I'll still do it. It don't matter. I don't care where I get the 1,000 views from. Okay, so yeah, I give it 5 stars. A lot of really cool aspects to the film. I guess my final thoughts on it would be, as it pertains to loving your neighbor as yourself, to attach to what Nate talked about and what Michelle also talked about, in that, looking at things, looking at this tragedy of the bombing of Hiroshima as not just a political side you take, but rather a human side, in that human beings were affected on both sides. Lives were lost, hearts were broken, families were broken apart, torn apart. poverty on both sides. There was a whole bunch of issues. And if you don't look at this from the perspective of a human and other people who uh, who are image bearers of God, not just here in the West or not just over there, if you look at it as these individuals were created in the image of God, we should respect and love them. I think that's the best way to think about this film, in that it touches the nerves of people actually were hurt. Not just, oh, I was on this side or I was on that side. And like Nate was saying, I mean, you have individuals who associate with a certain political party and they're blind to all the issues on their side, or blind to the issues on the other side. I take more of the stance of I pledge my allegiance to Jesus, and I examine both sides based on what Jesus said, and whether both sides agree or disagree. If you don't agree with Jesus, you're wrong, just because God created us. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I want to thank my panel for being up here. Thank you, Nate, for taking the time to come up here. Thank you, Michelle. And make sure you guys go ahead and subscribe to the BK Apologist. He wasn't able to make it today. He's a busy man. He's got a lot of things going on. So make sure you guys subscribe over at the BK Apologist. He has a lot of really cool things up there that you guys can watch as well. And make sure you support his channel. And we all love him up here. I want to thank everybody on the live chat who was very engaged. I truly appreciate it. And listen, next week, we were going to cover My Neighbor Totoro, but we're not going to cover it next week just because it takes place right before Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving. And I don't want to have my people on here telling me I had them working the day before Thanksgiving. So anyway.
And I definitely will say that. I will definitely be the Nate might not say it, but I'm going to say it. And it's me. He's talking about me, y'all.
Okay.
He ain't talking about Nate and Alfredo.
Michelle's gonna let me know. But
yeah.
We're going to take next week off, but we're not skipping the movie. We're still going to go. We're just kind of taking a little break. So the week after, we're going to watch My Neighbor Totoro. Then we're going to watch, what's the name of the movie?
The series.
What's the name of the series we're watching? There's two of them. I know the last one is Avatar. So, what'd you say?
Is it Yasuke?
Yes.
I don't know how you
no, you're right. So we're going to cover Yasuke. And of course, the very last
Netflix.
one on Netflix, and the very last one, you guys want to be there.
Avatar: The Last Airbender, also on Netflix.
Avatar: The
first season.
Yes, the first season. Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Not the movie.
Please, not the movie.
Not the movie.
I would quit if we had to watch that movie.
I'm gonna tell you one thing: when Avatar comes out on Netflix, the new Avatar that's coming out, the live action, we're definitely going to talk about that hands down. But you guys definitely want to be part of the last one for the season.
Definitely.
Yeah. So let me see. The last few. Mr. Green says, I think y'all should do The Last Emperor. Beautiful film. Not an anime though. Oh, that's cool. We got other films we can definitely do. This is just the anime season. He also says it's a great show, guys. Glad you enjoyed it. Wow. Rachel, she says, captivating live stream for sure. That means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Roxby said, oh, good. I would have missed it without the break. Get on top of stuff. But thank you, sis. I'm glad you're here. Okay. So with that said, thank you all for being here, and make sure you guys go and support the channel by liking, subscribing, sharing this video, and clip certain parts. You guys, there's an option below the videos where you can clip certain parts of the conversation and share those clips with your friends. And then they can come back and watch the whole thing. But with that said, God bless you guys, and we will see you after next week on our next Real Reviews podcast. Peace out.